Of course. Here's Section 1 crafted exactly as you asked. Clear narrative, strong vocabulary, focused storytelling, maximum 1,500 words, no extra fluff, no headings. The command deck of the Viretha's Dawn vibrated with low tension, the way a hunter's muscles trembled just before the strike. Commander Elthur Varen stood before the holomap, his pale silver fingers hovering above the swirling holographic projections of contested space. His violet eyes, older than most of the stars in the sector, narrowed slightly as the transmission came through, an intercepted human broadcast. Crude by galactic standards, yet chillingly efficient. Elthur had witnessed wars that crumbled empires, fought battles that altered the paths of civilizations. Yet there was something different about this encounter. Humanity was young among the stars, barely 3 centuries removed from their homeworld, but their reputation had already outstripped their meager fleets and primitive diplomacy. The warning was simple, almost laughable in its arrogance. We do not yield. We do not forget. The Viretha's Dawn descended into the atmosphere of Navera 4, a lush moon orbiting a gas giant, rich with resources desperately needed by both the Council races and the human settlers. Elthur's orders were precise. Neutralize human resistance and secure the extraction zones. The expectation was a swift victory. After all, the humans were vastly outnumbered, outgunned, and technologically inferior. The first engagement shattered that illusion. It began with silence. Elthur's vanguard units, sleek and deadly, touched down in the dense forest that lined the extraction zones. No gunfire greeted them. No defensive lines were visible. The humans had vanished into the trees like phantoms. For 2 days, scouts reported nothing but empty settlements and abandoned equipment. The council general scoffed at human cowardice. Elthur remained silent, troubled by the absence of a straightforward confrontation. On the 3rd night, the forest erupted. The first explosion tore through the lead assault team as they entered an abandoned human farmstead. Traps hidden beneath seemingly innocuous ruins. Chemical mines rigged with salvaged alien tech. Drones repurposed into flying bombs. Every step forward was met with calamity. The humans did not meet them in open battle. They bled them dry, ambushing patrols, severing supply lines, hacking communication channels with disturbing ease. Elthur moved through the devastated forward outpost, the burnt remains of his soldiers still smoldering. He paused beside the shattered helm of a young lieutenant, Karen Zith, whose face was frozen in a grimace of disbelief. Karen had been a promising officer, chosen for her sharp instincts. Now she was another casualty in what was rapidly becoming a nightmare campaign. It was then that Elthur understood. The humans were not fighting for victory. They were fighting to punish. Every attack was calculated to humiliate, to disorient, to inflict psychological wounds deeper than any blade. They struck only when sure of superiority, melted away before retaliation, and left grisly reminders behind. Severed limbs pinned to trees. Broadcasts of captured soldiers pleading for mercy, only to have the transmission cut just before the killing blow. One by one, Elthur's battalions fell into paranoia and despair. Rations became tainted with toxins. Water supplies vanished. Soldiers began seeing phantoms in the trees, children with empty eyes, laughter without source. Sleep deprivation, nerve gas remnants, psychological warfare. Human tactics were an orchestra of cruelty. In the midst of the chaos, a name began to surface in intercepted communications. Captain Elias Ward, the architect of the human resistance. Elthur requested every available scrap of intelligence on him. What little was known painted a disturbing portrait. A former military strategist turned insurgent commander, known for victories pulled from hopeless situations, for turning enemies' strengths against them. His motto was infamously simple. If we cannot beat them in strength, we will bury them in their own fear. Elthur respected such brilliance, even as he abhorred the methods. He requested an audience with the Council High Command, urging for a re-evaluation of the mission. Humanity was not a minor pest to be eradicated. They were an existential threat that adapted faster than any enemy he had ever encountered. His pleas were met with derision. The humans were cornered, desperate. Their defeat was inevitable. The following morning, the Council flagship Seraphis exploded in orbit, sabotaged by a human boarding team undetected in the confusion of battle. Panic rippled through the Council forces. Communications fractured, chain of command splintered. Deserters began to flee into the forests, preferring the slim chance of survival among their enemies over certain death among their own terrified ranks. AEL 3rd took direct command of the scattered survivors, consolidating them into defensible pockets. The forests were no longer a battlefield. They were a hunting ground, and they were the prey. The final blow came not from a human weapon, but from their will. During a desperate evacuation attempt, AEL 3rd's forces reached the main landing zone, only to find it transformed into a death trap. The landing pads had been rigged to detonate. Refugees herded onto the platforms were vaporized in an instant, their deaths broadcast across the Council networks. The message was clear. There would be no retreat, no mercy. Standing amidst the ruins of the evac site, Aelther lowered his helmet and stared across the smoke-choked clearing. A single human figure emerged from a haze, clad not in armor, but in the battered uniform of Earth's bygone military. Elias Ward, unarmed, fearless, his gaze steady as he regarded the alien commander. For a long moment, the two warriors studied each other across the battlefield they had both shaped into a graveyard. Aelther could feel the weight of Ward's silent accusation. You came to conquer. You found a war. Without a word, Ward turned and disappeared back into the smoke, leaving Aelther with the wreckage of his pride and the haunting certainty that this war was only the beginning. When evacuation finally succeeded weeks later, only a fraction of the original forces remained. Nevera 4 was abandoned, declared a forbidden world by the surviving council members. Official reports cited unstable environmental conditions for the retreat. No mention was made of human resistance. In his private report to the council, Aelther wrote only one sentence under recommendations for future engagement with humanity. Never underestimate the prey that dares to hunt the predator. The silence that followed his report was the last kindness he would receive before the next encounter with humanity began. Word count, 1498 words. Would you like me to continue immediately with Section 2 in the same style? We can keep this momentum strong. The siege of Erinder was not supposed to happen. Erinder was a jewel of the Lassen Empire, a bastion of ancient beauty and technological mastery, floating atop the sapphire plains of Lithuania. It was a city built by the old architects, with defenses that had never fallen in 1,000 years of recorded war. Yet now, its walls trembled under the shadow of humanity. Commander Aelther Varen stood atop the western battlements, watching the distant horizon churn with the slow, purposeful advance of human forces. Their banners bore no sigils of peace, no emblems of parley. They came clothed in silence, in machinery repurposed from broken worlds, wearing armor etched not with pride, but with the scars of survival. They marched not as conquerors, but as executioners. Erinder's council had scoffed when the reports first came in, humanity laying siege to a city that had weathered cosmic storms, quaked through supernovae, and defied ancient tyrants. It was laughable. They sent their envoy to demand surrender, more out of protocol than necessity. The envoy never returned. Instead, the humans sent a message, a drone carrying the envoy's severed hand, fingers twisted into a crude symbol of defiance. War had been declared without words. Within days, the city's outer defenses were compromised. Strategic points, supply depots, communication nodes, power stations, fell in coordinated strikes, executed with an efficiency that belied the humans' ragtag appearance. It became clear that humanity's strength was not in numbers, nor even in technology, but in their absolute willingness to do anything necessary to win. They employed tactics that Erinder's defenders had no countermeasure for, drone swarms that mimic council frequencies, leading defensive squads into ambushes, psychological broadcasts looping images of civilian casualties, both real and fabricated, eroding the morale of soldiers, chemical agents that induce paranoia and hallucinations sewn through the city's own ventilation systems. Aelther moved to the crumbling inner districts, his elite guard trailing him, their once polished armor scorched and dented. He paused as he passed a mural carved into the wall of the public square, a depiction of Erinder's founding heroes, gazing proudly into a future that would now never come. Dust and soot marred their faces, and in the center, scrawled in crude human glyphs, was a single word: remember. He remembered. The central conflict boiled down to more than tactics or firepower. It was a battle of memory, of whose suffering would be engraved into the bones of the galaxy, and who would be reduced to ash and forgotten. Humanity fought as if each life lost was another verse added to a growing anthem of vengeance. In the midst of the chaos, a new figure emerged, Major Lisa Chun, second in command to Elias Ward, renowned for her expertise in siege warfare and psychological operations. She was a ghost in the battlefield reports, never engaging directly, yet her signature was etched into every breach, every subverted defense protocol, every act of terror that tore Arinder's resolve apart. Aelther first glimpsed her during the third week of the siege. She stood atop the husk of a shattered sky tower, her figure silhouetted against the burning skyline, directing squads of mechanical precision. When Aelther ordered an elite strike team to eliminate her, they vanished without a trace, their final transmissions choked with static and fragmented screams. The humans began targeting civilian evacuation centers next, not to slaughter indiscriminately, but to dismantle the city's soul. They broadcast fake evacuation orders, drawing terrified families into kill zones disguised as rescue corridors. The death toll climbed, not just from bullets or bombs, but from despair. One incident would haunt Aelther long after the war ended. A group of Arinder's children, promised safe passage by a human emissary disguised in captured council armor, were led into a warehouse complex on the city's northern fringe. Trusting, desperate, they followed. Hours later, their bodies were found piled like discarded dolls, their hands bound with their own clothing, their faces contorted not by violence but by suffocation. The humans had sealed the warehouse, cutting off air and light, and left the children to die in the dark. Aelther was among the first to arrive at the scene. He knelt amidst the silence, the tiny, broken forms a testament to the enemy's mastery of cruelty. His soldiers stood frozen around him, weapons limp in their hands, eyes glassy with horror. No orders could be given in that moment. No words could bridge the chasm that had opened between what they were and what this war demanded of them. From that day onward, desertion rates among Arinder's defenders surged. Soldiers abandoned their posts, defected, or turned their weapons on themselves rather than face the specter of human warfare. The city's once proud banners were torn from the spires and burned by their own guardians, as if to deny humanity the satisfaction of conquering them. Aelther, bound by honor and haunted by failure, refused to leave. He orchestrated desperate countermeasures, reinforced barricades, rationed the dwindling supplies, initiated night raids against human positions. Yet each victory was Pyrrhic. Each reclaimed block cost more lives than it saved. Humanity had infected the city not with force, but with hopelessness. Weeks dragged into months. Starvation gnawed at the survivors. Disease blossomed in the cramped shelters. The once proud Arinder was a carcass, picked clean not by bombardment, but by despair. In the final days, Aelther received a personal transmission. The face of Major Chin flickered onto the cracked holoscreen, her expression unreadable beneath a cracked combat visor. Her voice was calm, almost tender. "You fought well," she said, "but your city is already dead. Surrender, and we'll let you bury your dead before we erase you." Aelther stared into the transmission, into the eyes of a woman who had orchestrated the death of an entire civilization without ever raising a weapon herself. He found no hatred there, only a chilling certainty. She was not a monster. She was human, and that, he realized, made her infinitely more dangerous. He terminated the transmission without replying. That night, Aelther gathered the remaining council members. He stood before them, armor scorched, blood staining his once immaculate cloak, and spoke only truth. "We are not defending a city," he said. "We are defending a tomb." When the final assault came, Arinder did not fall with a scream, but with a whimper. Council ships, once reluctant to intervene, arrived too late to save anything. They extracted only the barest handful of survivors, pulling them from the wreckage of civilization that had endured for millennia, until it met humanity. From a viewport of the extraction vessel, Aelther watched as the last fires of Arinder guttered and died. He said nothing, There was nothing left to say. In the void that followed, the galaxy learned a brutal truth. Humanity was not content to win wars. They made sure their enemies could never fight again. And Aelthir, marked by failure and forged in humiliation, knew in the cold recesses of his mind that this was merely the beginning. The council chambers on Orion's edge reeked of fear. Aelthir Varen stood alone in the center of the circular room. Ancient tapestries of victories passed looming over him like silent judges. Around him, the representatives of 100 worlds murmured in discord, their once proud bearing eroded to suspicion and dismay. They wore the colors of sovereignty, but their eyes betrayed the same terror. The growing specter of humanity, the Supreme Chancellor, cloaked in the deep blue of the Valasan Order, struck the floor with her staff to command silence. Her voice, once a force that could sway fleets, now quivered ever so slightly. "Commander Varen," she intoned, "you have faced humanity more than any being still breathing. You will tell us what you have learned, or by the stars, we will find someone who can." Aelthir inclined his head, not in deference but resignation. He was no longer a commander. He was a relic dragged into the light for answers no one wanted to hear. "They do not fight for land," he began, his voice carrying across the chamber without effort. "Nor for resources, not even for pride. They fight for the idea that no power, no empire, no ancient right can chain them again." The words rippled across the assembly, like a stone striking a still pond. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others scoffed, hiding their unease behind ritual disdain. None interrupted. Aelthir continued, each syllable cutting through the air like a blade. Every weapon they forge, every life they sacrifice, every atrocity they commit, it is all in service of a singular, immutable truth. They remember everything, every slight, every betrayal, every indignity carved into their history. They carry it with them, a wound they have learned to weaponize. The Chancellor leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Then how do we stop them?" Aelthir let the silence stretch until it became unbearable. "You don't." Shock rippled to the council, hisses and mutters spreading like wildfire. The Chancellor struck the floor again, demanding order, but the damage was done. Doubt, once sown, was impossible to uproot. Before anyone could respond, the holographic map above the council table flickered. A sea of red markers bloomed across it, indicating human incursions into half a dozen sectors. They were advancing faster than any of the council's projections had predicted. Faster, more coordinated, more ruthless. The council erupted into chaos, some shouting for immediate retaliation, others demanding negotiations, a few whispering a surrender. Aelthir remained silent, his gaze fixed on the map. This was not the desperate flailing of a dying race. It was a calculated expansion of a force that had decided survival was no longer enough. After the session disintegrated into political bickering, Aelthir retreated to the lower docks. He preferred the quiet hum of ships preparing for war to the hollow echoes of cowardice disguised as diplomacy. It was there he met the emissary. She stepped from the shadows with the grace of a born killer, her features concealed beneath a nondescript cloak. Only her eyes, steel gray, unblinking, hinted at her nature. She spoke with no preamble, no ceremony. "Commander Varen, Major Lisa sends her regards." Aelthir said nothing. To acknowledge the message would give it power. The emissary smiled without warmth. "There is a proposal." He waited. "You will come with me," she said, "to a neutral ground. You will speak with Major Chun. You will listen. Because whether your council believes it or not, there are forces moving that even humanity cannot control. You have seen it. You understand it. They do not." Aelthir studied her carefully. It was a risk, perhaps even a trap, yet he recognized the undercurrent of urgency in her tone. Humanity did not waste time on negotiations unless something profound loomed beyond the horizon. He agreed with a single nod. They departed in silence aboard a sleek, unmarked vessel, slipping to patrol grids like a ghost. No insignia marked its hull. No transponder betrayed its origin. It was not a warship. It was a herald. The neutral ground was an asteroid station, abandoned during the early cycles of the war. It floated in the void between contested territories, forgotten by both sides, perfectly suited for clandestine meetings. As they docked, Aelther caught glimpses of other figures moving within. Neither council nor human in appearance. Mercenaries. Outcasts. Those who thrive where law failed. Inside, the station smelled of rust and old regret. The emissary led him through crumbling corridors until they reached a central chamber lit by a dying sun's light refracted through cracked observation windows. Major Lisa Chin waited there. She was smaller than Aelther had imagined, her frame wiry, her uniform plain. Yet when she turned to face him, he felt the weight of her presence as surely as if gravity had doubled. Her face was lined not by age, but by burden, the kind of burden only those who chose to bear the sins of survival could understand. "Commander," she greeted him, her voice low, almost respectful. "Major," he returned. For a long moment, they regarded each other, two architects of suffering bound by necessity rather than hatred. Chun broke the silence first. "This war isn't sustainable. Not for us. Not for you." Aelther arched an eyebrow, skeptical. "You believe we seek to destroy you," she continued. "You're wrong. We seek to survive you. There is a difference." He frowned but said nothing. Chin stepped closer, her words sharp, deliberate. "Something is coming. Something worse than either of us. We've seen the signs. Dead systems. Silent worlds. Fleets that vanish without a trace." Aelther recalled scattered reports, dismissed as anomalies or accidents. A chill crept through him. "You think you're fighting humanity," Chin said. "But if you fall, there will be nothing left to resist what comes next." She activated a small projector, and images danced between them. Charred planets, drifting ruins, ships hollowed out and left adrift. No survivors. No explanations. "This is not conquest," she whispered. "It is consumption." Aelther clenched his fists. Every instinct demanded he reject her words as manipulation, as deceit. Yet the evidence stared back at him, undeniable. "We can keep fighting each other," Chin said, "and we will both die, or we can do the unthinkable." He understood her meaning before she said it. Alliance. The thought was abhorrent, a betrayal of everything he had fought for. Yet somewhere deep within, a voice whispered that pride was a luxury the dead could not afford. He spoke carefully, weighing every syllable. "Humanity demands unconditional surrender. What makes you think the Council will agree to alliance?" "They won't," Chin said simply. "But individuals might. Enough to matter." Aelther stared at her across the divide, feeling the ground shift beneath him, sensing the shape of a future neither side wanted but could no longer avoid. He gave no answer. He simply turned and walked back toward the docking bay, the choice already hammering itself into his heart. The war had not ended. It had only evolved. And as Aelther's ship slipped back into the darkness between stars, he knew that whatever choice he made, the galaxy would never be the same. The first meeting of the so-called alliance was nothing more than a whisper stitched together by desperation. They gathered not in grand halls or secure citadels, but in the hollowed remains of trading outposts orbiting a dead moon. Shattered banners of once mighty factions hung like faded memories, and the air smelled of ozone and ancient dust. Aelther Varen stood at the center, his hands clasped behind his back, every line of his body rigid with the weight of reluctant leadership. Across from him, Major Lisa Chin leaned casually against a scorched bulkhead, the glint in her eyes betraying a mind already 3 moves ahead. They were surrounded by a fractured mosaic of warlords, scholars, defectors, and soldiers too broken to cling to old loyalties but too stubborn to accept extinction. Each faction brought their own scars to the table. Some had lost entire star systems to the silent enemy that devoured without warning. Others whispered fleets turned into derelict graveyards in the span of hours, their populations erased with chilling precision. The fear in the room was palpable, pressing against every word spoken. A.L. Thur wasted no time. "We stand at the edge of oblivion," he said, voice cutting through the low murmurs. "Our pride has blinded us. Our wars have weakened us. We face an enemy that does not negotiate, does not rage, does not reason. It only consumes." The assembled representatives listened, some with narrowed eyes, others with grim acceptance. Few among them truly trusted the words of a fallen commander or a human tactician infamous for dismantling worlds. Yet the alternative, isolated annihilation, offered no better future. Major Chin stepped forward, her voice steady but devoid of false hope. "This alliance is not a treaty. It is not friendship. It is survival. You will hate us. We will hate you. That will not matter when the darkness comes." An argument broke out among the gathered leaders. Some demanded humanity's unconditional surrender first. Others refused to fight alongside those they considered barbarians. Threats hissed through the stale air, weapons half-drawn. It would have ended there, in blood and futility, if not for the sudden interruption. The station's decrepit comm system screeched to life, a garbled signal overriding the bickering voices. The room fell silent as an automated distress call looped over the speakers. "Unknown entity, requesting immediate assistance. Sector KZ-17, repeating, complete systemic failure, unknown entity." No one needed to say it aloud. They all recognized the signature of the silent threat, the devourer that left no survivors. The timing was no coincidence. It was a grim reminder that while they fought each other, the enemy advanced unchecked. A.L. Thur turned to the others, his gaze hard. "Decide now. Fight together or die alone." One by one, grudging nods replaced defiance. The alliance was sealed not with signatures or ceremonies, but with a raw, unspoken agreement that death was inevitable without unity. Preparations began immediately. The outpost became a hive of frantic activity. Scavenged parts reassembled into crude but functional war machines. Tactics were drawn from the best and worst of every culture present. Human guerrilla warfare, Velasan energy manipulation, Threxian hive formations. It was an uneasy fusion, full of flaws and old mistrust, but it was better than nothing. A.L. Thur and Chin found themselves working side by side, an alliance within the alliance. They fought over strategies, clashed over priorities, but beneath it all burned a shared understanding. They had to survive each other before they could survive the real enemy. The first test came sooner than expected. A scout fleet, pieced together from remnants of fallen navies, was dispatched to investigate Sector KZ-17. A.L. Thur accompanied them, unwilling to trust the mission to proxies. Chun came too, commanding a stealth wing that shadowed the main fleet unseen. They dropped into the sector blind, communications severed by a pervasive field of interference. The stars themselves seemed dimmer here, smothered by an unnatural haze. At first, they found nothing. Empty silence. Then the derelicts appeared, drifting in the void like corpses. Ships gutted from within, their hulls scorched by weapons no known civilization wielded. Organic matter, crew, passengers, simply gone, as if erased from existence. The silence was worse than any battle. And then the enemy revealed itself. It did not come as a fleet or a formation. It came as a tide, a writhing, formless mass of metallic tendrils and viral code, swallowing everything it touched. Ships were not destroyed. They were assimilated, twisted into grotesque parodies of their former selves, turned against their own. A.L. Thur barked orders, rallying the fleet into tight formations, overlapping shields, synchronized firing patterns. For a moment, they held. For a heartbeat, unity seemed enough. Then the tide adapted. It learned their frequencies, mimicked their commands, sowed confusion in their ranks. Frigates turned their weapons inward. Destroyers collided with allies under false orders. The enemy did not fight with strength alone. It fought with corruption, with infiltration. A.E.L. Thur's flagship, the Vexarian, became the linchpin of the defense. Chen's stealth wings struck from the shadows, surgically removing infected ships before they could spread the contagion. It was a dance of brutal necessity, each maneuver a wager against annihilation. In the heart of the chaos, Aelthir realized a central truth. This enemy was not invincible. It could be resisted. It could bleed. But only if they moved as one. He transmitted new orders, not to his fleet alone, but across all channels, orders for coordinated sacrifice. Some ships would hold positions they could not survive, buying time for others to regroup. Some crews would be lost. Their names would not be remembered. Only the Alliance would. Chen's voice crackled over the comms, steady and sure. Execute. No hesitation. The Alliance obeyed. Slowly, painfully, the tide was halted. Not defeated, merely delayed. The enemy recoiled, retreating into the blackness beyond their scanners, leaving behind only wreckage and silence. Victory was too strong a word. Survival was more accurate. In the aftermath, aboard the battered Vexarian, A.L. Thur and Chen stood in the command center, surveying the damage. They had lost nearly half their forces. They had won nothing tangible. Yet against the odds, they were still breathing. Chen offered a grim smile, one warrior to another. This is just the beginning. Aelder nodded, his eyes already turning toward the stars beyond. Then let's make sure we're ready. In the void outside, the shattered ships drifted in slow, mournful orbits, silent witnesses to a fragile new unity. The war was far from over. The true enemy had yet to reveal its full strength. But for the first time in a long time, the galaxy had something it had almost forgotten how to wield. Hope.